TV7 Israel News is made possible thanks to your generous donations. Shalom and good evening. This is TV7 Israel News broadcast to you from Jerusalem, and in today's top stories. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken warns Iran that there are a few weeks left before other options will be introduced to contend with Tehran's nuclear program. Iranian-backed militias allegedly launched rockets towards the U.S. Embassy in Iraq. The United Nations urges warring parties in Yemen to resume dialogue amid intensified battles in Ma'rib governorate. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken warns Iran that there are a few weeks left to evaluate whether reviving the 2015 nuclear agreement is viable, after which other options that are closely coordinated with concerned countries will be looked at. Nevertheless, in an interview with the American National Public Radio, Secretary Blinken re-emphasized that the Biden administration continues to regard the so-called Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, or JCPOA, as the best thing for U.S. security.
We still believe that if we can get back in the weeks ahead, not months ahead, weeks ahead, to the JCPOA, the nuclear agreement, that would be the best thing for our security and the security of our allies and partners in the region. But, Marie-Louise, we're very, very short on time. The runway is very short. Iran is getting closer and closer to the point where they could produce on very, very short order enough fissile material for a nuclear weapon. And at the same time, they're making advances that will become increasingly hard to reverse because they're learning things, they're doing new things as a result of having broken out of their constraints under the agreement. So we have, I think, a few weeks left to see if we can get back to mutual compliance. That would be the best result for America's security. But if we can't, we are looking at other steps, other options, again, closely coordinated with concerned countries.
Pressed further on what the U.S. is prepared to do to ramp up pressure on Iran if diplomacy fails within a few weeks, Secretary Blinken reiterated work being done on options with Washington's partners in Europe, the Middle East, and beyond.
These are exactly the options that we're working on with partners in Europe, in the Middle East, and beyond. Everything in its time, but this has been the subject of intense work as well in the past weeks and months. And again, there too, we're prepared for either course, but it's clear that it would be far preferable for our security, for the security of allies and partners, if we can get a return to compliance. But if we can't, we'll deal with this in other ways.
The remarks by Secretary Blinken were made ahead of the 16th day of the 8th round of indirect negotiations with a delegation of the Islamic Republic of Iran, which concluded earlier today in Vienna. Separately, in the Iraqi capital Baghdad, the United States Embassy compound was subject to a rocket attack by what the mission said were terrorist groups attempting to undermine Iraq's security, sovereignty, and international relations. Local security sources confirmed to TV7 that the embassy's surface-to-air C-RAM systems intercepted the majority of the hostile projectiles, while Iraqi military officials reportedly noted that one of the incoming rockets exploded in the vicinity of the Al-Ilaf school compound. Thankfully, no injuries were reported. And while no militant group claimed responsibility for the attack, intelligence sources pointed out in a conversation with TV7 on condition of anonymity that the presiding assessment based on hard evidence indicates that Iranian-backed militias were responsible for the attack directed at the embassy. One of TV7's sources further revealed that Washington relayed a warning to Tehran regarding the continued attacks by its proxies against U.S. personnel and assets in Iraq in particular and the region at large. In other yet related news, Supreme Leader of the Islamic Republic of Iran, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, selected an animation video depicting a targeted killing of former President Donald Trump as the best entry in a competition commemorating the second anniversary of the assassination of RGC Quds Force commander Qasem Soleimani. Published on the Iranian Supreme Leader's official website, the video shows the former American leader being targeted while playing golf at one of his residences in Florida. Asked at a press briefing whether the intelligence community was assessing the Iranian threat directed at the former U.S. president, White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki said the following.
I'm not going to speak to the work of our intelligence community. Obviously, the kind of rhetoric or video from the Supreme Leader is something that we've seen, offensive rhetoric and behavior in the past. But I'm not going to speak to more specifics of internal discussions.
Earlier, the State Department spokesman Ned Price was asked about a meeting that was held by the head of the U.S. delegation to the nuclear talks with Iran and representatives of the Gulf Cooperation Council, or GCC, in Vienna.
Rob Malley and his team, in addition to others here in this building, are regularly updating our GCC partners on our progress. When it comes to our GCC partners, you've also seen them issue statements and speak favorably of a potential return to compliance with the JCPOA. Of course, that wasn't always the case, but you have heard from countries around the world, including in that region, that the reimposition of verifiable and permanent limits on Iran's nuclear program would be to our advantage, and that's precisely what we're seeking to do.
It is important to stress that while none of Washington's Mideastern partners object to a deal that permanently and verifiably ensures that the Islamic Republic of Iran does not obtain nuclear weapon capabilities, all of the respective states have unequivocally indicated on multiple occasions that the Iranian nuclear agreement in its 2015 format does not provide suitable guarantees, a notion similarly voiced on the 26th of September 2017 by the former Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency, the late Yukiya Amano. Separately, State Department spokesman Ned Price was also asked about the latest advances by the Saudi-backed government forces against the Iranian-backed Houthis in Yemen and whether it could translate into some kind of diplomatic gains to get the Houthis back to the negotiating table.
We've been intensively engaged with the UN, with Yemeni and regional leaders to do all that we can to advance a durable and negotiated resolution that does the opposite of what the Houthis are doing right now, to bring an end to the conflict, to improve the humanitarian conditions of the Yemeni people, and to give them the space for them to collectively determine their own future. The Houthis cannot engage in a military offensive and expect to gain any leverage by that. It will not work for the United States. It will not work for our Saudi partners. It will not work for the UN Special Envoy and his team when it comes to this. All the continued Houthi offensives will do, whether it's Marib or elsewhere, is aggravate the humanitarian emergency that is gripping the country of Yemen.
It is important to know that while the United Nations has been actively engaged in trying to reignite a diplomatic process to end the conflict in Yemen, the Iranian-backed Houthis, or Ansar Allah in Arabic, has rejected any prospects for dialogue, vowing to persist with their Iranian-sponsored offensive until all of Yemen is under their control.
I will continue to stress that warring parties can, should, and indeed must talk, even if they are not ready to put down their arms. Ansar Allah remains determined to continue its assault on Marib, and there is a renewed fighting in Shabwa, where 3 districts have been captured from Ansar Allah. We have seen an increase of airstrikes, not only around front lines, but also in Sana'a, including in residential areas. Airstrikes and shelling in Taiz have increased, and fighting continues in southern Hodeidah. Similarly, attacks on Saudi Arabia have also increased. All of these events have led to civilian casualties and damage to civilian infrastructure. I remain convinced that part of the challenge is that the party's preconditions are linked to broader political and governance questions, and as such, a comprehensive political solution is necessary to achieve sustainable results. This will require difficult discussions with and among the warring parties and those who have been left out during the war. I will nevertheless continue to explore options for fast-tracking de-escalation if and when the parties are ready to pursue these options.
It is worth noting that the Iranian-backed Houthis, whose motto derives from Iran's revolutionary slogan, which reads, "Death to America, death to Israel, curse the Jews and victory for Islam," has been designated by former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo a terrorist organization on January 12, 2021. However, after fears by international groups that the designation would further harm the humanitarian situation in Yemen, the Biden administration decided to reverse the Houthi terror designation merely a month later. Since the latter decision, the Iranian-backed Houthis have gradually escalated their attacks until February 7th of last year, when the Houthis launched an all-out offensive to try and conquer Ma'rib Governorate, which is the last territory which remains under control of the Saudi-backed, internationally recognized government of Abd Rabbu Mansour Hadi. Thank you for watching us. As part of TV7 Israel's prayer initiative, I would like to encourage you this evening to join the team and me here in Jerusalem to lift up New Zealand in prayer for its salvation and peace, alongside prayers for our persecuted brothers and sisters worldwide, in addition to our ongoing prayers, of course, for the peace of Jerusalem and the salvation of Israel. I'm Jonathan Hassan, wishing you a Shabbat Shalom U'Mevorach, and we will see you again on Monday at the same time.